You are listening to One Nation Under Crime, a chronological true crime podcast. Each week, we go through our nation's history and discuss one case from each year. Starting in 1800, I'm Kayla.
And I'm Leah.
And now it is the day after Halloween. How are you guys feeling? You got a Halloween hangover? Were you just like sad that Halloween's over? Because I'm sure I have one of those right now.
Nah.
Was it good? Tell us. How was your Halloween? We'll wait. Sounds like a lot of fun. Sounds great. Yeah. So now we're making it. It's November 1st. Now we're into there's only 2 months left of 2021.
And I've gotten a good dent in my Christmas shopping. I mean, that's the thing. If you're not started now,
we're recording this week in advance, and I'm sure I still haven't started.
Oh no, I
do mine in December.
Oh, that gives me hives. I mean, I've already gotten.
Well, I don't have to. You've got a lot of people to shop for. I don't. I don't have a lot of people to shop for, so I guess that's probably why.
I do. I've got lots of people. I've got nieces and nephews, and surrogate nieces and nephews, and sisters and brothers, and moms and dads, and in-laws and outlaws, and crooks and straights. And wait, that's a country song. Wait a minute.
Yep. Well, we hope that y'all enjoyed your Halloween. You still have Halloween candy, so you can still munch on that. I'm sure I will. My favorite Halloween candy are the white ghosts, the Reese cups.
Ooh,
they're the best. I like the white ones. They're so good.
You know what I did?
So good.
Well, I went to the store and I bought my husband and myself. I bought 2 Reese cup pumpkins.
Oh yeah, you told me.
One for my husband.
I have some in the fridge if you want one. They're cold too.
But wait, one for my husband, one for myself. He ate his, and I left mine in the dish on the counter. Showed restraint, and it sat there for several days. And after dinner, I was like, "It's time." And it wasn't there. And I'd seen it earlier that day. And I'd seen it there. Now, my husband works from home with me. Okay. So we're both there together all the time. It's just me and him in the house. No kids.
No one to blame it on.
I mean, the cat and dogs do not have thumbs. And I went to
not
get
like
it.
those anthropomorphic wolves from a few weeks ago.
No. I was like, I went to get it, and it was not there. And I walked into the living room where he was sitting, and I said, "Where is my Reese cup?" Y'all, he was chewing on the last bit of it.
Stop.
I said, "Did you eat my Reese cup?" And y'all, he looked. I mean, he was ashamed. He goes, "Oh, I thought it was mine." I said, "I bought one for you and one for me." And he said, "I thought they were both mine." And I said, "No, they were not. One was mine." "I'm sorry. Don't like to do about it now." So we went to the grocery store. We went on a date. We went to Walmart and Publix, and then brought home Chinese from the Chinese store next to Publix at 4 p.m. But when we were in the store, I said, "Look, there's some Reese cups." And they had a 2-pack and then a single. And so I got a 2-pack for me and a single for him.
You already had your 2.
That's right. And then I hid mine because when we got home, we unloaded all the groceries, and he put the Reese cups in the same little bowl on the counter. And then he noticed a little later that the 2-pack was missing. And he said, "What happened to you? Where's your Reese cup?" I said, "Don't worry about it. Yeah, I took care of it." And he said, "Well, where'd you put it?" I said, "Up." And he started laughing. I was like, "You ain't eating mine again." So I hid them. And no, Michael, I'm not telling you where they are.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. I would be quite mad.
He ain't eating them again. I got a place to put them.
Well, I hope you guys have had all of the Reese cups that your heart can desire. If you don't like Reese cups, whatever it is that you like.
And you don't have to hide them.
Like Leah. Yeah, so we're up to episode 25. We have made it a quarter of the way to 100. How
whoop.
weird is that? And it is November, like we said. So now, while I eternally live in spooky season. For the rest of you, we are now in thankful season. And
Yes.
we would be quite thankful if you would leave us a 5-star review on Apple
Yes.
Podcast. Especially with all the new listeners that we have, we would greatly appreciate it if you would go do that. 5 stars only. If you have nothing nice to say, then don't say anything at all. A lot of you new listeners are from the South, and you know what your grandmother taught you. And so, don't do it.
Some people's grandmothers might be like Clary.
I mean,
can't
that's
say
true.
nothing nice. Come sit next to me.
Come sit next to me. That's true. Well, honestly, that's probably me and Leah.
Well, maybe more you than me. But.
Probably. I admit it. So, other than that, we are going to get into the case this week of 1823. The title of this week's case is The Sheriff's Mistress.
Oh, no.
So, let's get into it. We'll go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and put a trigger warning at the top of the episode. Not a trigger warning so much for any gore or anything like that. There are going to be certain discussions of topics this week that some people may not be comfortable with people under a certain age hearing.
Little ears.
Which, I mean, whatever. Little ears listen, whatever. I mean, that's up to you. You're the parent. I'm not. But there is going to be some discussion. So just trigger warning. We are going to have some discussion of there is some sexual assault that occurs in this case. We are going to be discussing terminology later on in this case about something else. I will give you a trigger warning before that happens as well, just because it's not going to take long. It'll just be a few minutes. But in case, you are in the car with someone and that's just not really something that, you want to sit there and listen to with them sitting there, you can come back to it later.
We'll
that's
have
fine.
questions to answer that you're not ready to discuss.
Yeah, or if you don't want to answer those questions, then that's fine. It is just another discussion of terminology like we've had before that we're going to talk about. So we'll get through that. But our sources for this week, the Herald Mail Media had a good article, and then Murder by Gaslight, always a good one. They're the ones that shout out to them because they're the ones that gave me the idea for the title for this week's case. So we'll get into it. Our events in 1823. There is one event this year that I had to put in there, and I'm sorry, guys. I'll give you a trigger warning to skip ahead like 2 seconds when you hear it, but it was too good to not put in. So we'll see. January 3rd, Stephen Austin, the founder of Texas, or Tejas, as some people might say, like Chicago, receive a grant of land in Texas from the government of Mexico. January 27th, President James Monroe was appointed as the first U.S. ambassador to South America. February 3rd, Jackson Male Academy opened in Tennessee. It is now known as Union University. March 11th, this is literally what it said. The first normal school in the U.S. opened.
Normal school?
It's named Concord Academy in Concord, Vermont. I guess not like a boarding school or something by that. But yeah, that was what it was. April 22nd. This just gave me just a little happiness and nostalgia in my heart. April 22nd of 1823, R.J. Tyler patented roller skates. Always a good roller rink is always fun. May 10th, the first steamboat to navigate the Mississippi River arrived at Fort Snelling. We will also discuss a steamboat in this case as well. August 23rd, Hugh Glass. Sorry, I'm not meaning to laugh. It's just the way that this goes. August 23rd, Hugh Glass was attacked and mauled by a grizzly bear and left for dead in the Missouri Territory.
Oh, dear.
He crawled 200 miles. Crawled before making it to get help. And it was the inspiration for the 2015 movie with Liam Neeson, The Revenant.
Wow.
Remember that movie with the wolves?
Didn't watch it.
Yeah, but you remember like the commercial of it with Liam Neeson. Anyways,
sorry.
It's a very, very, very popular movie.
He
won a bunch of awards that year
Sure.
and everything for it. So September 22nd, Joseph Smith went to where the, quote, golden plates were stored and said he was directed there by God through an angel. The golden plates are the source that helped Joseph Smith translate the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's the Mormon guy.
And we will talk about him, and he is going to be the topic of an entire episode.
Joy.
Because...
of course he is.
He's involved in something.
Of course he is.
Undated event for that year, Middlebury College in Vermont became the first U.S. institution of higher education to grant a bachelor's degree to a Black American, Alexander Twilight. What a fantastic name.
That is very
I like
fun.
it. It's fun. You can skip forward like 5 seconds if you don't want to hear this. I am going to use a word. It is what it is. This was just a fun fact that was too good to not leave out. So go ahead and skip forward now if you would not like to hear just one word of language. John Neal published 76, the first American work of fiction to use the phrase, son of a bitch. Did you think I was going to leave that out? Like, it was in the events for that year. And I was like, they thought it was good enough of event. So I think it's a good enough of event. So I'm putting it in there. But that was the first American work to include it.
What was the title?
76.
Okay, then.
I don't know. I didn't look into
76 trombones.
So our births in 1823, we're going to get to a really interesting one. That
you said birds. You did not say birds.
January 23rd, Dan Rice. He was a famous clown. Not a fan. He was an Aquarius. February 3rd, Spencer Fullerton Baird was an American
name,
isn't it? It was an American naturalist, ornithologist, and museum curator, and he was the first curator at the Smithsonian Institution.
He sounds like his name,
like that has to be a job.
Yeah, that and his name fits that. Yes.
So he was an Aquarius.
He wasn't like, was he a third? Did you say that?
No, he wasn't.
He sounds like he should be. Yes.
Should be.
Yes.
February 5th, Rachel Crane Rich Mather established the Mather School for Daughters of Freed Slaves in South Carolina, which eventually became the Technical College of the Low Country. And she's an Aquarius. Then March 23rd, Schuyler Colfax was born, who was the 17th Vice President of the United States. He's an Aries. And we think this is this guy's date of birth, but we're not real sure, so we're just going to go with it. July 9th, and I put in parentheses, maybe, Phineas Gage was born. Some people might know the story of Phineas Gage, and we might discuss it later on in an episode, but it is just fascinating. So, little bit of a warning for anybody who doesn't really want to hear some massive drama that happens to someone. Just skip forward about 30 seconds. It's not too bad, but some people it's a little, Leah's never heard this, so she's probably going to in a second. Phineas Gage was an American railroad construction foreman who survived an incident when a massive iron rod was driven through his head, destroying most of his left frontal lobe. The rod entered the left side of his face before the jaw joint and exited out the top of his skull.
I actually knew his name, and I was thinking that that's what had happened. So I knew this from somewhere.
It's in history books, and you'll see why in a second. It's known as the American Crowbar case. He is known as one of the greatest medical curiosities of all time.
Did you see my hand motions? I was like, I think that I couldn't remember where, but I knew it was through his head somewhere.
It was on the left side of his face, and it's like right before your jaw, like where your mouth opens.
I can't remember where, but I knew it. Like I was like, I know that it went through.
He lived for 12 years after the incident occurred.
Craziness.
Even though everyone said he was not himself after the incident, which duh.
I don't think I would be either.
Right. He was a Cancer. August 5th, Elizabeth Tibbets one of the founders of Riverside, California, and an activist in D.C., spiritualist who led seances, and known for successfully growing the first 2 hybrid Washington navel orange trees in California. She's Leo. September 23rd, Sarah Jane Lippencott, a.k.a. Grace Greenwood. She was an American author, poet, correspondent, lecturer, and newspaper founder. She was one of the first women to gain access into the Congressional Press galleries. She started The Little Pilgrim, a children's magazine, who published works of Louisa May Alcott.
Cool.
When she died, her obituary was on the front page of the New York Times.
Wow, that's a big deal.
She was a Virgo. And December 23rd, Thomas Wiltberger Evans. What a name. He was
Interesting.
He is an American dentist. He performed dental procedures on many heads of state, such as Napoleon III, and received medals for dentistry. He popularized many techniques which are standard now, including using, thank you, Kat, whichever one that was, which included using amalgam for fillings, which a lot of people, dentists still use today, and using nitrous oxide, so laughing gas. He was a Capricorn.
I've never used that.
I have. It's delightful. I do it every time I get my teeth cleaned. Leah knows my stress going to the dentist.
Yes. I have helped you with that before.
That's how I'm able to go. September, let's see, our deaths in 1823, September 28th. Charlotte Melmoth. She was an English actress known as, quote, the grande dame of tragedy on the early American stage. After a mildly successful career in Great Britain and Ireland, she came to the U.S. in 1793 and became known as one of the best actresses of the last part of the 18th century. So, like I said, our case this year is in 1823, and in the fall of 1823, George Swearingen met Mary Scott in Hagerstown, Maryland. September of 1828, Mary Swearingen fell off her horse and died. Then George Swearingen and Rachel Cunningham fled, making them fugitives of the law.
Ruh-roh.
So we'll get into Hagerstown just a little bit. I did look up the phonetic saying of that, and Hagerstown apparently is how you say it. Hagerstown is located in Washington County, Maryland, and it is ranked as Maryland's 6th largest city. In 1739, Jonathan Hager, a German immigrant from Pennsylvania, purchased 200 acres of land in the Great Appalachian Valley between the Blue Ridge and I believe it's Allegheny Mountains. Isn't that what it is? Sure. In Maryland. He originally named the town Hager's Fancy. Later in 1762, Hager also officially founded Elizabethtown, named for his wife Elizabeth Kirshner. In 1794, the government officially arrested 150 citizens during a riot, which was in response to the Whiskey Rebellion, which we discussed in our case, our episodes of Alexander Hamilton. Hager went on to become known as the father of Washington County. And then in 1813, the city council renamed Hager's Fancy to Hagerstown. The town went on to be a staging area during the Civil War due to its location right on the border of the North and the South. And Hagerstown's nicknames became the Hub City when it became the center of the Western Maryland Railroad. Today, Hagerstown is a vital location on the CSX, Norfolk Southern, and Winchester and Western railroads. One of the most recognizable symbols of Hagerstown is the weather vane known as Little High School. High School spelled Heiskell. Named after the German tinsmith Benjamin High School, who created it in 1769, in the form of a soldier with a feather on his helmet carrying a forward-facing bayonet. So the bayonet kind of is pointed forward, and he's got like this big feather on the top of his hat.
Is that what's on the Maryland flag?
I don't know. It was placed atop the market house first and then moved to City Hall in 1824. And it was in both of those places for a combined 166 years. When you see it, you'll know it. I don't know if it's on the flag for them, but I do know that it's like a major symbol
I've lost my mind.
In that area. So this weather vane during the Civil War was it gained an iconic bullet hole that is still in it from a Confederate sharpshooter who won a bet after shooting it from a full city block away, which is roughly 310 to 323 feet away. Considering this was during the Civil War, that's pretty good aim. In 1930,
sharp shooting.
Yeah.
See what it did there. Gracious.
In 1935, the original weather vane was retired and placed in the Museum of the Washington County Historical Society, and then to where it sits today in the Jonathan Hager House, which is open to tours. You'll still see a replica of the weather vane on City Hall today.
That's cool.
So it's very
need to add that to our road trip.
Interesting. So
Maryland is very pretty.
I've never been there. I've always wanted to go there.
I have family that lives there.
George Swearingen was described as handsome, popular, and a hard worker. He was even given a position clerking for the county of Washington, Maryland, when he was only 16. Eventually, he had to leave his job due to a pulmonary condition, which is a lung condition for those who don't know, caused by overwork. I put, not sure how you were overworked as a clerk for the county, but okay, go off.
Maybe the papers were too dusty.
It was 1821 when George was sent to live with his uncle John Swearingen in a boarding house in Hagerstown. His uncle was the sheriff of Washington County at the time, and while it seems like this story would be about him, seeing as he is the sheriff, it is not. George was 21 when he moved in, and 2 years later, Mary Scott moved into the same building as George and became very smitten with him almost immediately. Mary's father was a distant relative of the Swearingens, so she was distant cousin of George's, but whatever.
Well,
Mary came from a fairly wealthy family, and she would be considered a catch by many standards. George's family was very aware of how well off Mary's family really was, and his family encouraged him to court Mary.
Woo her.
2 years later, the two were married, and they moved into a house of their own. George was studying to practice law in Maryland, but decided to run for local office instead of following in the footsteps of his uncle. At the same time, Mary was pregnant with the couple's first child. Mary started to have complications while carrying their child, and since George was so focused on his campaign, she went to Cambridge, Maryland to stay with her parents. It happens often in stories like this at this time, but while Mary was away, it was George's turn to play.
Sounds like a Mariah Reynolds situation.
George was just your typical man, after all, who had manly needs, and those needed to be fulfilled.
Lord, help me say no to this.
In fact, at one point, George himself said, quote, "I occasionally visited those houses of libertinism and chambering, which Solomon declares to be the way to hell leading down to the chambers of death." All right. And how could we possibly expect George to handle his own washing and mending?
I mean, he's just a man.
That's women's work. Duh. Right?
Obviously.
I hope you hear the sarcasm in my voice, people. Well, this led George to come across Rachel Cunningham.
She's cunning.
Rachel was a laundress and a well-known sex worker in the area. who is also referred to as a fallen woman. And we'll get to why she is called that.
There's a joke in there about sheets. But we'll continue.
Okay. This is where your trigger warning is going to come in. We are going to have some discussions about sex work and the discussion surrounding that and kind of go from there. Like Leah said, if this is a topic you would not like to really answer questions, if anyone else is listening and you would not like to have that conversation at this moment, go ahead, skip forward. So here's how we'll do this, because this is what I thought was interesting when I was reading about it. So we are going to talk about the word prostitute and what prostitution actually is versus the word sex work. So I'll go ahead and put in here the reason that I'm using these terms so that it's kind of understood. Prostitute has actually been part of the English language since the 1500s, and the term has morphed over time. To quote, prostitute was something that it's not something that someone did. It was something that was done to you, if that makes sense, and I'll get into it. In 1520, the term was used to, quote, expose publicly. It doesn't say expose yourself. It just says expose publicly was the term. In broader terms, in 1560, it kind of evolved, and the term meant to, quote, surrender to any vile or infamous purpose. In broader terms, you could view that as someone who's sexually assaulted, not necessarily as someone who offers sex for money. Because it's surrender to any vile or infamous purpose. These terms are very, we'll get into more of them. It's very weird. So, according to etymonline.com, which is like etymology, but etym online, quote, the notion of sex for hire is not inherent in the etymology, which rather suggests one, quote, exposed to lust or sex, quote, indiscriminately or randomly offered. So literally it meant to be exposed to sex that is randomly offered to you. So technically as a wife, I guess you could prostitute your husband. Leah's face. I mean, it's like, what? Okay. Y'all got a science lesson last week. You get an English lesson this week. We're here to make you well-rounded people, apparently. So if we're going to move on to a transitive, then it is an act to do something. So moving on to the adjective, it's simply devoted to corruptional purposes. And then finally, if you were using it as a noun, it is a person who exchanges sexual intercourse in exchange for pay. Or a person such as a writer or painter who deliberately debases, dilutes, or abandons his or her talents for money. Immediately when you listen to a case on the news or you listen to a case, really anything, any like forensic files or anything that you're listening to. And the reporter says the victim of violence was a prostitute. Specifically, that's the terminology that they use. Most people put less of a value on that person's life based on that one statement because the word has negative connotations to it. So a lot of times, and I did hear this in passing, and I won't say where, I won't say who, I won't say anything, but it was relating to a documentary that was on Netflix. And somebody said, oh, isn't that about a bunch of prostitutes? I'm not going to watch that. They had it coming. That is why this is a term that is being outdated.
They had it coming.
So you could say, well,
I'm sorry, I'm picking my chin up.
I know. That's
not okay.
It was rough to hear. It was rough to hear. And because
I'm sorry.
I believe there's value on life when you hear a story of someone who is murdered or they are, or anything. It doesn't, they shouldn't have been murdered. It doesn't matter what, and I'll get into more of that here. So,
oh, that makes me sad.
It hurt. It really hurt me, like on a physical level, to hear someone say that. We have a lot of people listening. I understand there are a lot of different opinions. So just stay with me for a moment. So you could say, well, that is a high risk lifestyle, right? And it's dangerous, and you should know that. Okay. Let's look at the list compiled by the University of Delaware of the most high-risk jobs available in order from most to least based off fatality rates. All right? So we have log workers as number one. 111 out of 100,000 log workers die every year due to a logging-related incident.
I can see that.
So we're going to go down the list. Then we have aircraft pilots and flight engineers, derrick operators, and oil, gas, and mining. Those are the people that go out into the middle of the ocean and they work there.
They get paid so well.
Then you have roofers, you have garbage collectors, iron workers, delivery drivers, farmers, firefighting supervisors, and power linemen are just the top 10 out of 25 that are listed. That is just the top 10. Also on the list are crossing guards, construction helpers, heavy vehicle and small engine mechanics, police officers, mining machine operators, and maintenance workers. Now, not going to get on my soapbox. Try not to.
Step away, step away,
step away. Of those jobs are risky. And you could also say that simply going to work for people in those fields is considered a high-risk lifestyle.
Yeah.
You cannot place value on someone's life based off of a title that is placed on them. Yes, sex work in the traditional sense is not legal in most places. I'm aware of that as well. But there are many types of sex work that are out there.
And I will say there are other jobs that I would lead you to go to instead of those.
Mm-hmm.
I would. But the one of the most important lessons my dad ever taught me was a person's a person.
At the end of the day.
No matter how small.
Correct.
Just like Horton Hears a Who. Everybody is somebody. Everybody has their own story. And everybody has worth.
Yes. And everybody is somebody to somebody.
Yes. And everybody should be treated as a person.
Exactly. There are some people who are in sex work and it is not their choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely there are.
In this story, it's pretty clear that Rachel chose to do this for one reason or another. But for some people, they are in an abusive relationship or they were kidnapped and forced into it.
And that is correct.
Some people think it's
that is sad too.
Some people think it's the only way they can provide for their family. Some people
have been told that. And that's what they
exactly.
That's what they believe is true.
And there are some people who choose it, and that's what they choose as a job. And I understand you have your own life decisions. You can make your own choices for yourself. Look, if it's something you're doing and you're happy in it and you feel like it's a safe space for you, sis, go off. Bro, go off. Whoever you are. Man, woman, indifferent, I don't care. If you feel like that's something for you, be safe. I get that. But understand that there is a vast majority of people who did not want to be in that lifestyle. Just be thinking about that. That is why I call Rachel in the story a sex worker instead.
Now, jumping back on track.
There's a quote that will come up later that does say it, but it is a quote. So, Rachel Cunningham was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Like I think pretty much everyone was at this time. My gosh, so many people are from there. Her father was a wealthy doctor, and she was sent to boarding school as a young child. Unfortunately, Rachel's mother died when she was only 9, and her father followed when Rachel was 14.
Ooh.
There wasn't very much money left over after the burial of both of her parents, and Rachel went to live with her aunt and uncle, the Wallingdons, in Bedford, Pennsylvania. The Wallingdons rented out rooms during the summer season, and Bedford was a popular resort town, so there was quite a bit for Rachel to help out with. Rachel was described as beautiful and, quote, a well-formed teenager. I do not like that description.
Ugh.
Bedford was described as, quote, a summer resort of profligacy and pollution.
Well, there you go.
There are two definitions for profligacy. One is reckless extravagance or wastefulness. The other is the use of resources, and the other is promiscuous or unprincipled behavior. Considering the next part of this, I'm going with the second definition. Because it was said that men took notice of Rachel as a teenager. Anyways, Mrs. Wallington, Rachel's aunt, was not one to let a money-making opportunity pass her by.
Since you had Rachel shake hers.
Well,
Come on.
She realized that with Rachel around, she could charge double the price for rooms and still have the boarding house full because of the men who adored her niece. This wasn't the greatest idea because then Rachel figured out that she could trade favors for expensive gifts, jewelry, and even money from some boarders. One of these boarders that paid special attention to Rachel in more ways than one, his name was Orlando Haverly. Orlando was a young man who was very wealthy, and he soon fell in love with Rachel and needed to have her as his own. For my research, it says that Orlando was a man of color, and I'm only putting that in here because I'm not trying to whitewash anything, but I'm also not exactly sure by what they mean by a person of color. They did not indicate anything, and so I also don't want to assume anything.
Right.
But the reason I'm mentioning it is because still during this time, interracial relationships were pretty much forbidden in most areas. So this would have been quite the scandal.
Yeah, right.
Rachel and Orlando saw each other throughout the summer whenever they found an opportunity. Once the season was over, Orlando checked out of the boarding house with the promise to come back at a specific time for Rachel. The time came and Rachel climbed out her window and got into Orlando's carriage. This is typically where the couple runs off and gets married and lives happily ever after, but this story does not go that way. Orlando gave Rachel everything she wanted and when she wanted it. Although they were never officially married, the couple did refer to each other as husband and wife. One evening, Orlando came home to find that Rachel was canoodling with another man who was only referred to as Mr. G. Yes, I used the word canoodling. I just thought it was fun.
I'm so glad you did. I like that. Canoodling.
The men dueled one another to see who would have Rachel, and Orlando was shot and killed by Mr. G. Mr. G took Rachel with him to Annapolis, Maryland, and she became the woman of the house. Mr. G's family was not okay with this, and when his two sisters expressed their objections, he kicked them out.
Uh-oh.
The story at this time was very similar for Rachel compared to when she lived with Orlando. She was given anything she wanted. That was until she tried to fire a servant. Mr. G refused to let Rachel fire the servant, so clearly the only solution was to poison Mr. G.
Oh, no.
Well, Mr. G figured out what she was doing and figured out, hey, I don't feel great. And he sent Rachel away after breaking off the relationship.
Probably smart.
Rachel was on her own. She ran away from her aunt and uncle, so she likely wouldn't be welcomed there. Both of her parents were gone. Orlando was killed in a duel, and Mr. G fell out of love with her when she tried to kill him. So she traveled to different areas on the East Coast, and she, quote, lived off of her beauty until she eventually made it back to Pennsylvania. She lived in Franklin County with a wealthy merchant for a bit and then moved on to Philadelphia to be a mistress for a judge. Until she quickly grew bored of him and left for Hagerstown, Maryland. Somehow Rachel went from being a mistress to a sex worker, and she also took in laundry. It's not real sure quite how that happened. In an article written about Rachel, she was described, and this is a direct quote here, she was described as, quote, an ignorant, vulgar prostitute of the lowest grade with no other attraction than a very moderate share of personal beauty.
Well,
very kind. sure it was a man that wrote it. Anyways.
Well.
Regardless of how anyone described Rachel, George Swearingen found himself smitten with her.
Smitten kitten.
Smitten. George took Rachel to a Methodist camp meeting, and on the way back, he ran the buggy into a stump, wrecking the vehicle and injuring Rachel. The affair between the two became known in the middle of his campaign for sheriff.
Uh-oh.
His political associates advised George to distance himself from Rachel, but he refused. George was a popular candidate, and even though everyone knew about Rachel, he won the three-way race for sheriff.
Wow.
Rachel was severely affected by the knowledge of her relationship, and her landlord threw her out.
So where'd she go?
George set her up in a house of her own and visited often. George's love for Rachel was an obsession. He even saw a poem in a newspaper, and he erased the original name and put Rachel's name in and cut it out and sent it to her.
An obsession is never a good thing.
During all of this, his wife, Mary Swearingen, was still in Cumberland with her parents. In September of 1828, George rode to Cumberland to bring his wife back home. They were both on horseback traveling back to Hagerstown. And then on September 8th, a farmer herding cattle found Swearingen, George, sitting beside the body of his dead wife. She had fallen off her horse and died. Her body was then taken to Cressup Town, and a coroner's inquest was held. The jury viewed the body and examined the horse.
Dun, dun, dun.
The knees of the horse were cut as if by a fall. They concluded that Mary, quote, came to her death by an act of providence. Mary was buried, but Charity Johnson was one of the women who had prepared her body for burial. And she thought that Mary hadn't died in a fall from a horse.
Uh-oh.
She had bruises on her throat and other bruises that suggest she was violently sexually assaulted.
The plot thickens.
Charity Johnson wanted the body disinterred or exhumed and examined again. George refused. But Mary's mother believed that her daughter had been killed by Rachel Cunningham and agreed to the exhumation. George and Rachel both fled Maryland, first traveling together, then they separated and they planned on meeting in New Orleans.
So now, question.
Mm-hmm.
The friend that helped prepare her body?
Just a woman, just a random woman.
Oh, I thought you said it was a friend of hers.
No. She was just a random woman who.
But she was a townsperson, so she knew what was up.
Correct.
Okay.
She was there to prepare Mary's
But she knew what
body.
was going on while Mary was gone.
Claire's clocked in for her shift at the biscuit making factory.
Yes, she has. She loves me best. She likes to sit with me.
She loves that blanket. That's why she's. Look at his paws. Those cutie little paws. Have you seen that TikTok where it's like the cat is watching the it's like a KitchenAid mixer on the counter, and it's watching the KitchenAid, and it's making like they're making biscuits. And it looks at the cat, and it's like, "What's wrong?" And the cat's like, "I'm just afraid. I think I'm gonna lose my job."
That's funny.
Making biscuits.
So
just a woman of the town who was.
She knew what was up.
Yes,
with
everyone knew.
Well, yeah,
everyone.
but it wasn't like somebody that was from Mary's hometown where she had been like, okay,
correct, because this was in Hagerstown,
right? Okay, just making sure.
So Rachel and George both fled Maryland, first traveling together, then they separated, planning to meet in New Orleans. Rachel traveled by steamboat. As I said, it comes back. She likely passed George, who was using the name Martin while he was traveling at the time. George was floating down the Mississippi in a flatboat. Rachel was traveling by steamboat on the Mississippi. George made it to New Orleans, but was apprehended after leaving the flatboat. He was taken back to Baltimore, Maryland, and then conveyed to Allegheny County for a trial. At the trial, everything came out. The prosecution alleged that George had tried to murder his wife twice before her actual death.
Oh, my.
First, in a buggy accident on the side of a mountain. And second, the day before the murder, he allegedly tried to drown her while passing a river.
Oh, my.
The first was probably a legitimate accident. George was notoriously bad at driving, and we did discuss that before when he got into an accident with Rachel.
Right.
The second, with no witnesses, was probably not true. George's attorney, John L. Mahone, explained that Mary had suffered from, this is a medical term, guys, let's see, leukophlegmatic temperament, which made her liable to spontaneous uterine hemorrhaging.
Oh, my. That does not sound pleasant.
No. Her doctor had advised her to refrain from sex, explaining why George strayed in the first place. The condition also explained why she appeared to have been violently sexually assaulted after the death. For good measure, he speculated that Charity Johnson, who was preparing her body, attacked the body with a broomstick.
Oh.
Beating her and whatnot and whatnot. I can't.
Just
to
keep going.
implicate
just go on past it, girl.
To implicate George as a murderer.
That is horrible.
The jury found George guilty of murdering his wife.
Oh.
Before he was executed, George confessed to killing his wife, Mary. Though he denied a lot of what was said in court, he admitted that he had knocked her off of her horse. And here you go. Here's the tea on what happened.
Wait, let me get a sip of mine.
Go ahead.
I got tea right
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead. We'll wait. Okay, sounds good. All right. Mary,
I really had tea.
She really did. Mary had wanted to stop at the Tevis farm. I believe it's Tevis or Tevis. It's kind of spelled like Tervis without the R, so Tevis. A property that they owned, but George refused, knowing that at that time, Rachel was staying there. When Mary persisted, it angered him, and George rode alongside her, where he then punched her in the temple, knocked her off the horse, and down a hill where she hit her head on a rock, and she was killed.
So it was accidental.
Supposedly. While standing on the gallows, George sang a psalm and told the crowd that he wanted it to be understood that he died in peace with God and all the world. He had no doubt and no fears that his repentance would be accepted. It was never known for certain what happened to Rachel Cunningham, but a book on her life was published not long after the murder, which said that she was tried and hanged for the murder of Mary Swearingen as well.
What psalm did he sing?
Did not say.
Well.
But that is the story of the sheriff's mistress and the murder of Mary Scott Swearingen.
That's kind of sad.
It is kind of sad. Mary's like, I'm just an innocent bystander. I haven't even been here. Like,
you don't even go here.
I don't even go here. You should just go home. I mean,
brought in a Mean Girls quote.
Doesn't even go here.
You go, Glen Coco.
Mean Girls is such a good movie.
It really is.
All right, everyone, raise your hand if you've been personally victimized by Regina George. Oh gosh, it's so funny. So
fetch.
Stop trying to make fetch happen. Although I do love that she is in a lot of Hallmark Christmas movies.
Mm-hmm.
I do appreciate that.
Love Lacey Chabert. I love her.
She's very pretty.
She has aged quite well too.
Very well.
Like
there are some people who have aged very, very well. She is definitely one of them.
Mm-hmm.
She's not. Yeah. She looks very good.
She's beautiful.
So, anyways.
You are beautiful. That was perfect.
Of course. I can't.
I didn't realize it. And then when it hit me, I was like, well, I got to sing it now. I'm sorry, guys.
She's not.
Look, my brother is home from
I
Virginia.
know, so
I have not seen him.
We've been
months.
pushing through these recordings to get these done so she can see her brother. So
he's home.
We will, and yes, this is the brother that we discussed on our USS Apervier case, who is in the Navy.
Yes.
So he got leave and he's home. So we'll let Leah go spend her family time. And while Leah is spending that family time, you can go to our website where you can find all ONUC information you're looking for. It is onenationundercrime.com. I know, guys, it's real hard to remember, but I think you can do it. We are One Nation Under Crime on Facebook and Instagram, and at ONUC Pod on Twitter, and One Nation Under Crime on YouTube. Just go and find us and subscribe there. If you love our podcast as much as we do, go on to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review. As always, 5 stars only. We would only give you 5 stars, so you should only give us 5 stars.
True.
That's how things go.
True.
We do have a Patreon. If you would like to help with the cost of making and hosting the show, just search for One Nation Under Crime.
And we would really like for you to do that.
We would greatly appreciate it. My laptop is finally back, and
Woohoo!
that was fun.
She set up a payment plan.
So, thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of One Nation Under Crime. I hope y'all are getting over your Halloween hangover quite well. And
you've hidden your favorite candies from the people that might steal them from you.
Mm-hmm. Get ready. Get yourself prepared for the thankful season.
I'm thankful for you, Kayla.
No, I'm thankful for you.
Aww.
Oh, and your Black Friday shopping.
Well,
I love Black Friday ads.
I don't do Black Friday shopping because they start it on Thanksgiving Day, and that's just wrong.
That's true. Well, I mean,
nope.
We won't discuss it. Anyways,
I do the online shopping, but no, I don't go out anymore.
Oh, Cyber Monday. Cyber Monday is always pretty good. So we will see you here, same time,
different crime.
And remember, there isn't always liberty and justice for all.
Nope.
Goodbye.
Bye.